The Munster Rugby Podcast, Red 78 with Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Nobody knows Munster Rugby better.
Welcome along to episode 12 of the Red 78 podcast, the Rugby Channel's home of everything Munster Rugby, with me, Quinlan, and of course, Niamh Briggs. We planned on this episode to be largely looking back and reviewing the Leinster game, but of course, COVID had its way as well. And as ruining the second half for our podcast this week, the game was called off. Obviously, we put ourselves in a tricky position last week previewing the game, and then obviously it went. So it's disappointing. Fingers crossed that we can get a game this week between Connacht and Munster. We're recording this Wednesday afternoon, so fingers crossed nothing changes and we get teams announced in the next couple of days and the game goes ahead. Don't forget to get in touch with your thoughts on all things Munster. You can tweet us at Rugby Channel or search for the Rugby Channel on YouTube and leave a comment. And of course, to subscribe to the podcast, just search for the Red 78 and you'll get your podcast straight to your phone every week. So my co-host, of course, Niamh Briggs, she's here. How was Christmas for you, Niamh?
Good, quiet, Quinny, quiet. Santa came, everybody's happy. So yeah, can't complain. Did you have a nice time?
And Tottenham are on a good run.
We're on a good run. Weren't so great yesterday now against Southampton, unfortunately. 10 men after 38 minutes and we couldn't find a winner. But no, still unbeaten in Conte's Premier League spell, so we'll take that. But a tough night for Liverpool, I see. Leicester are a very good team, to be fair.
They didn't play well last night, in fairness. But anyway, it looks like City are going to run away with it. But anyway, that's for the highly paid prima donnas across the water. Let's focus on our rugby players here who train differently, work hard and get less paid, obviously way less paid than what they do in England. But someone who's been to the forefront of Irish rugby and Munster rugby now for 10, 12 years, someone I played with towards the last couple of years of my contract before I retired, was Conor Murray. After the podcast last week, it was announced that he'd signed a new 2-year contract. Probably has come under a bit of scrutiny in the last few years and has, had a couple of injuries. And probably when you get to that level, I think, of excellence that he's achieved and, recognition right across the world of being a world-class player for a number of years. And then maybe that stagnated a little bit and we haven't seen we've seen glimpses of the brilliance of Conor Murray in his prime, but I'm sure he'd argue with me and say I'm talking rubbish, that there's still loads left in him and he's signed a new 2-year contract. And I suppose it's really good news for Munster in a sense that, that experience and that nous and that, I suppose what he's achieved over the years, he can keep bringing young fellas through, and Craig Casey is someone who's chomping at his heels a little bit, trying to get into that Munster side. But what did you make of it? 2-year contract, Irish contract. Andy Farrell believes in him, and he's going to be around for another couple of years, which is great.
Yeah, look, I think it's a really good bit of business, to be fair, from the RFU and Munster. I think the Conor Murray that burst onto the scene full of youthful exuberance, like a young kind of a Craig Casey in terms of the pace that he moved the ball, is not the same Conor Murray that we see now. But I don't think that's necessarily a gripe for criticism for him. I just think that the way the game has evolved and the way that he's asked to play makes it very different. I think Conor Murray we see playing for Munster is different from the Conor Murray that we see playing for Ireland. People will jump up and down and speak about the box kicking, but effectively, if you're asked to go out and play a certain way, it's very different, and a team are expecting you to play a certain way. It's very difficult to change that. I think his defensive work is unbelievable. He's probably the best defensive line, and it's only when you go and watch him live do you realise how much he cleans up around. I think his passing is really good. You'd love to see him do a little bit more, but his majority of the time, his box kicking is on the money. He's probably one of the best box kickers in the world.
Do you think he suffered a little bit with maybe the type of game that's under Rassie Erasmus and Johan van Graan, that he's the one that probably comes in for the most criticism because of a lot of kicking, and a lot of kicking was in their game plans and their structures, and that's just a reality. he probably gets the most criticism at times. I've watched Conor over the last couple of years, and at times you think, and people ask me this question, is it because he's told to kick it or he's decided to kick it himself? I think most of the time it's part of the structure and part of the game plan. When Conor Murray came on the scene first, and I was still playing with Munster, 2009, 10, 11, those couple of years, I just remember him at training and going, this guy is sensational. We played touch rugby in the warm-up, and, you know, his skills, his pace, his athleticism, and we've seen brilliance from Conor Murray, and it's understandable. Anybody that goes into their 30s, there's going to be a little bit of difference. They have to adapt a little bit, the way they train, the way they play, and but class is permanent. I think he's an unbelievable athlete. He's achieved so much. I would just love to see, and again, Conor might disagree with this, and people may disagree with it, and feel free to challenge me. I would just love to see him express himself and be a running kind of scrum half, and get the ball in his hands a little bit more, as regards having a few snipes and a few breaks and off open play. I know your primary job is pass, get the ball away from the breakdown and all that, but I think he has paid a little bit of a price for structural setups. And, you know, he has received a fair bit of criticism, but there's been times when he's been just world class. You think of those wins against the All Blacks, performances, winning Grand Slams with Ireland, all that, going British and Irish Lions tours. He's been right at the top. And I think I just love to see the last few years for him to probably be not as structured. That's something that maybe coaches would challenge and say, you can't do that. But just, he looks a little bit like he just needs to enjoy himself a little bit more now and really go for it. Because let's be honest, he's had brilliant success with Ireland, but hasn't had that success with Munster.
Yeah, look, I think a big thing for him as well, signing on, is that he, you know, a new coaching ticket's obviously coming in now. Would be interesting to see how he evolves under that. And I 100% believe that it's the way that Munster play, rightly or wrongly. I think that's the reason why he's come in for that kind of criticism. And you're right, teams kind of lump on him fairly or unfairly. But it's really difficult because.
But Johnny Sexton has got it as well. Do you know what I mean? Johnny Sexton.
I know, but I thought when he came on against.
Both those guys are at such a level and they've achieved so much that there's obviously more scrutiny when the big players and their team doesn't play well. So that just happens in all sports. And I just think it's a pity, because I just hope in these next 2 years, no matter what happens, that he plays and kind of goes out in his own terms, if this is his last contract, because I think he's a brilliant leader and he's a brilliant player for any team he's involved in.
I know, Quinny, but if you look at it in twofold, right? So this November, obviously, Ireland's style of play had evolved to a huge amount. There were a lot of running rugby. There was a lot. Murray was coming off the bench and moving the ball. He was running with the ball. So it's in his armoury. It's just that that's not how Munster play. And so therefore, we don't see the best of that. And I think you think back to Thomond Park, I think it was 2, maybe 3 years ago now, because we lost the year with COVID. 72 minutes on the clock, Craig Casey comes on off the bench and they're in Leinster territory and he box kicks.
Yeah,
it is actually just how a structural pattern play that Munster go with. And if they have, you know, no strike play, or if they've gone a number of phases, then they look to go to the air to try to win it back that way, or force the opposition to mistakes. That's their philosophy and how they play. So I do think that I think it's a really good bit of business for Munster, for Ireland, and I hope that as the new coaching ticket comes in and we hopefully see a little bit more of that freedom and that evolution to be able to play a bit like that Wasps game. He was excellent in that Wasps game when they were moving the ball at the point of contact, you know, that we'll get to see that Conor Murray again.
Yeah, that's what, and I was going to ask you, and we might have a quick chat at the end, what's your kind of wish list for 2022 for the men's and women's teams? And I'll ask you that again in the end. And I bet you one of the things you're going to say, and lots of fans would say, is to see more attacking rugby. Like I say, sometimes I just feel some of them are, Conor is kind of programmed a little bit. He has enough experience and credibility to kind of take hold of a game himself. And maybe we'll see a little bit of difference, point of difference with a new coach that comes in. And I know we're not going to get bogged down in game plans. We have seen some evolution. And Stephen Larkham he was kind of the great white hope when he came in a couple of years ago. I don't think we've seen enough. Let's be honest. And I don't think the fans say that too. So we haven't seen enough. He spoke in the press yesterday about the decision to leave and how it is a tricky situation if your head coach, assistant coach leaving. And let's be honest here, Munster are not favourites to win the European Cup or the URC, the United Rugby Championship. We need him to be in the mix in both, though, I think, for it to be seen and to play some good rugby in the next few months. So look, hopefully that can happen. Craig Casey, he's not going to be jumping around thinking Conor Murray's going to be around for another 2 years now, and I'm going to have to wait. I think he'll keep chomping at the bit, and I'm sure he'll get chances. And maybe Conor Murray might become a different player off the bench, starting some games, and have more competition, because there hasn't been a real competitive nine putting him under massive pressure in Munster for a long time now. Just speaking on contracts, it's that time of year again. Speculation, and unfortunately we have to speculate sometimes. It's good that we can react to news, because that's what we want. We don't want to be breaking news, because we want to react to the news that comes out and give our opinions on it and get the opinions of the fans. But there's a little bit of uncertainty about Damien Dialende and RG Snyman. The contracts are up at the end of the season. Will they leave? Will they stay? Well documented about RG Snyman, his injuries and the unfortunate two cruciates that he's had, and it's just such a shame that we haven't got to see a consistent run from him, because I think he's a game changer. I think Damien Dialende in the last 18 months has been brilliant. He's been consistently good for Munster. At times they've been under pressure, particularly when it comes to the knockout stage, and it's difficult for a centre just to grab hold of the game and win it on his own. But I think he's performed very, very well for Munster and has been a brilliant signing. It looks like, from what I'm hearing, that he's going to depart at the end of the season. But the good news, and again, it's speculation, it would be great news, but I'm hearing that RG Snyman is very, very much open to extending his contract and trying to repay the faith that Munster put in him. And if that's the case, well, that's a great sign of his character. And I would love if he did that. I'm sure all the Munster fans would love if he did that. And it's something that may happen now. I think it was looking a bit gloomy for a while, and maybe it is, who knows, that the two of them are going to depart. But there's rumours now that I'm hearing that RG Snyman may stay, which would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the overriding feeling after that second injury was one that he, felt really bad. Not guilty, but upset that he couldn't repay because we were there. I was in the stands the night that he came back from the injury at the start of the season, and to hear the roar anytime, coming onto the pitch, and anytime he got near the ball of the crowd, like, it must be brilliant for him to be able to experience something like that. And I just think he knows how much he's welcomed and valued, and how much, even though they haven't seen a huge amount, but how much the supporters absolutely love him. So it'd be brilliant. Look, that would be a brilliant piece of business if that's the case. I think he's just an absolutely incredible athlete, like the most phenomenal, biggest man I've ever seen. Covers a ridiculous amount of ground in very quick time, physical. So it would be brilliant. And look, Munster have also got to be smart too. Two cruciates, one after the other. They've got to make sure that they get the best out of him too, in terms of if he does sign on, that he actually get to play. I think that's. But from what I'm hearing, all signs in terms of his rehab are going very well. So, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be such a brilliant story? I know that sport doesn't offer us up. It's not always happy places, and it can be real cruel at times. And his period with Munster has been really cruel, to be fair. But wouldn't it be a brilliant ending if he got to get on the pitch for a season for Munster, I just think it'd be super.
Yeah, there is good players in the second row position. Owen O'Connor, Thomas Ahern, Fineen Wycherley. There is quality players. You've got John Klein, Tyg Byrne. So is it a position that we really, really, really need? I think he was brought in, and Dia Linde was to take Munster to the next level, to take him past that semi-final position, to get him in the mix for to try and compete and win a European Cup. But look, hopefully he gets back, and I think it'd be great if he does stay on and play on for as you say, people would love to see him being involved in Munster for a consistent period of time. Ben Healy was speaking yesterday as well that his contract, he's close to signing. Some of these contracts, Niamh, and I'll be honest with you, and this is for listeners as well, they're already signed. They're done. They're just not announced, I think. And the reason being is, I think, there's small details that need to get finalised, and they're agreed and stuff like that between agents. Maybe they're not signed, but you always want to get these contracts done pre-Christmas. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more Munster players that have extended after Christmas. But getting on to the rugby match that we hope we have on Saturday, Connacht will be kind of chomping at the bit. I think they'll really believe, and my feeling here on this one is this is a big task for Munster. They went up there last year. Were probably fortunate in the end to win it. I thought throughout the game for probably 70 minutes they looked like they were physical. They were abrasive. They controlled the tempo of the game, and they were in a really good position. But then you had that crazy period where Munster are down to 13 men and Connacht have a scrum and nearly win the game. I think that's a big regret, and I'm sure Andy Friend and the Connacht players will speak about that. More recent times down in Thomond Park, they lost by 2 points again. Munster scored late on to win that game. So these games have become very, very tight, not just in Thomond Park, but or not just in Galway, but in Thomond Park as well. In the last 12 meetings, I was just looking back. I could go back farther. Munster won 10, Connacht 2. So should we just assume that Munster will get the job done here, or how difficult is this game going to be for them going to the sports ground on Saturday?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be very difficult. I think that Connacht are playing some brilliant rugby at the moment, and I really like what Andy Friend is doing up there. I think he's doing a really good job with the resources that he has. Thought they were incredibly unlucky over in Leicester. They played so well for maybe 50 minutes. I think the front row for Leicester coming off the bench really was the turning of the game. So from that aspect, I think it's going to be tough for Munster. I think a couple of things for Munster is going to be huge. It's going to be team selection, and I'm sure when they sat down and planned out this period, they might have looked at certain games that international players had to have a rest, and senior players, and could they introduce more younger lads? And I wonder now, given the fact that they have had so little games over the last, probably month or two, do you change that or do you stick to your guns? And so it'll be interesting to see that team selection. And I just do think that up there, it's a very difficult place to go, as well as I do. So it'll be a big task for them. But I think Munster need to win. I think they need to win to show their evolution in terms of where they're going, their ability to eke out games. And hopefully, we'll get to see a performance too.
How did it beat Connacht? Because you mentioned the Leicester, what Leicester did in that second half a couple of weeks ago in Europe, where they had that scrum dominance, and probably that kind of changed the game, that physical presence. Munster's front row, they're not going to be able to do the same thing, are they? And if they don't, then how do they win the game? I think, how do they deal with, Connacht's been really, really up for this game and really believing that they can beat Munster. Like I said, looking back to that game last season and looking back to the more recent one in Thomond Park, I think there's a different type of body language now. Even going back to my time, and I mean this respectfully, we had probably better squad depth. We had probably far more internationals. And when we played Connacht, we felt that if we kind of rolled up the sleeves and dealt with the kind of physical, emotional energy that Connacht would bring, that we would be, if we were up for it basically ourselves and not just expecting it, that, the quality that we had and the bit of depth would win out. That's different nowadays because this isn't about emotion. They have quality as well. So how do Munster beat Connacht? Is it, kicking the ball, mauling, using their forwards, or do they have to score tries here? Obviously, it's weather dependent. And should they really go for this game? Because I'm just trying to think, where do they beat them? Who starts at 10? How do you control that game? So if they're not physical, if the physical thing, if Connacht don't roll over with Munster's physicality, how do they beat them? Is it Damien Dialende? Is it, Keith Earls? Is it variety in their game?
Yeah, that's like a really good question. I think Munster should still have pack dominance in terms of. I know they're expecting Dennis Buckley to be back, which is a big plus for them. But I also think that Munster's tied 5 should be in a position to be able to probably be on top of Connacht. I think they have their own injury worries as well in there. So from that perspective, you'd like to see them being able to, I suppose, match them or understand that if we can put them under pressure in these spaces, then we'll have room elsewhere. I also think the back three of Connacht's defence is a little bit suspect at times. I think so, especially if you look to get the edges. But to get the edges is the difficult part, because you're looking at Bundy Aki and Sammy Arnold and their defensive Conor Oliver. They're having unbelievable season defensively. So their ability to get off the line, their line speed, not only their line speed, but their ability to be able to read the play, to be able to shut it down is really, really good. So you've got to look at having the understanding to how do you get to that edge. It's not just simple as saying, okay, we'll pass the ball to the edge. I think you've got to be able to show a bit of variety. So whether that's a flat kick pass, it's whether you put the ball in behind them to make them turn, to be able to put pressure on them that way, or in and around that tight where the likes of, Dave Kilcoyne and Niall Scannell, John Klein, that you can put them under pressure in and around the tight of that ruck space. I just think that if you're going to play in and around the middle of the park, you're going to be asking for a lot of trouble, because I think, as I said, Conor Oliver, Bundy, Jared Butler, Sammy Arnold, these players are playing incredibly well at the moment, and their ability to shut down space and disrupt the ball, it caused Leicester a huge amount of problems last week. So Munster's got to have to be exceptionally good at their breakdown work, but they've also got to be incredibly aware that if they move the ball, that they've got to be able to look after it too. So it offers up a huge amount of conundrums. I think that this Munster-Connacht rivalry is starting to grow, gain a huge amount of traction and a huge amount of momentum over the last couple of seasons. Even though you're saying there earlier on, in the last 12 times Munster have won 10, the games have been incredibly, incredibly tight. And I think that Munster were lucky to come outside in the last 2. So Connacht will definitely be relishing this.
And they're trying to create something under Andy Friend and win against big teams. And look, even though Munster maybe the history and the culture of the place is huge, European champions, it's a big scalp for them. So if they beat Munster here, it's huge, and they're on that kind of journey under Andy Friend, which everyone enjoys watching them play. I think 2 areas for me, and again, it's difficult because we don't have teams, but 2 areas for me that Munster really struggled in Thomond Park in the last time was line speed from Connacht. Now, at times, they gave away some penalties and they pushed the kind of offside line, which you run the risk of giving away some penalties if you do that. But if it works and you get off that line really quickly, you can stop the opposition from playing. And that worked pretty well for them in Thomond Park. They got pinged a few times for jumping the gun early. So I think they're going to put Munster under a lot of pressure there, particularly with whether it's Healy or Crowley at 10. They're going to try and get at them and unsettle them. And as you say, Bundy Aki, Sammy Arnold, Jack Carty is a doubt. So he'd be a loss to them. I think Conor Fitzgerald will come in there, who's a very good player as well. But So the line speed is an issue that Munster struggled with the last time, and the breakdown. I think Conor Oliver, Jared Butler, I think Cian Prendergast has been an absolutely brilliant find for Connacht. He's a wonderful athlete. I think he's really stepping up to the plate. Looks like has a bit of an attitude. His work rate is through the roof. I really like him as a player, and I think there's real opportunities for him going forward to maybe play for Ireland as well. I think he has that ability. So Paul Boyle as well. They're physical, abrasive players. And if the Munster players are listening, which we're not sure if they ever do, I think they'll know this as well. This isn't something that I'm just revealing the secret. I think they look back at that game. They struggle with Connacht's line speed and the abrasiveness at the breakdown. Connacht were just hammering into Munster at every opportunity. And I think Munster just were a little bit off the pace with their aggression and physicality. So make no bones about it. I think this is going to be a really physical, sparky game where there's going to be a bit of pulling and handcuffs and handbags, I should say, not handcuffs, but a little bit of there's going to be a bit of bite to it, I think, because both sides are really desperate after the break and not playing last week to try and get a win here.
To be fair, I think if Connacht looked at that Cast game, Cast offered Munster a huge amount of problems in terms of that breakdown as well, and that line speed. I think that difficult.
And Niamh, I think the Cast game is bad news for Connacht because Munster will be fuming. The players, the coaches, the way they played, and they'll know the feeling outside of the group. So I think they need a performance. It's really intriguing. Everybody needs a performance in most matches, but I think there's going to be a bit of bite to this. And sometimes we talk about these Interpros, and you said it. There's a bit of niggle kind of developing this Connacht Munster game the last few years, and maybe because it's Sammy Arnold, Conor Oliver, guys who didn't play there, Alex Wootton, they didn't make it per se to be regular starters for Munster. So they have a bit of an edge. So there will be an edge to the game. So it's certainly one to look forward to. And we really, really, really hope we have a game on Saturday. It's hard to preview it again when we don't have teams, but I think Munster will probably look at saying the idea was to mix and match through these Interpros for all the teams, but I think they've got to go as strong as they can here with a view to maybe they'll have a home game against Ulster to maybe changing it up a little bit there. And then you've got Casts and Wasps. Fingers crossed those games happen. So it's going to be a busy couple of weeks. 4 big games coming up now for Munster. I think it's important that, obviously Christmas is a nice time for lots of people. We miss the sport, but it's also a tough time for people. And there's 3 people I just want to mention who passed away. Jerry Moore, former Munster president. I was great friends with Jerry when I started out with Clanwilliam, with Shannon, with Munster. I'd always meet him in Thomond Park. He was great crack. Would always get us a few tickets when we were on the Munster team, a few extra tickets, get people passes into the games. And Jerry passed away recently. He was a great rugby man, not just a Munster man, but a rugby man. And he'll be sorely missed. Also, Jim Sherwin, iconic commentator for RTE for so long. Loved his rugby. And obviously was commentated on lots of other sports. I played with his son, Ian Sherwin, and Shannon. His other son, John, works for the RFU. So that's a tough time. He passed away just before Christmas as well. So our thoughts with both families, the Moore and Sherwin family, 2 iconic rugby men. One other person, Pat O'Brien, Brian O'Brien's brother. Brian was Shannon manager, Munster manager and Ireland manager in my time there. And his brother, Pat, who was a great clubman with Shannon as well, he passed away as well. So sad times for people, but 3 great rugby men there that I just wanted to mention because all 3 of those guys had big involvements in my rugby career. So I just wanted to mention them and honour them and say, remember them for what they did for rugby and for loads of different people. So that's it for this week. Hopefully we'll get a match to talk about, and we'll be back again next week to review what happens between Connacht and Munster and look ahead to the home fixture at Ulster on the following Saturday. So thanks, Niamh. And like last week was Happy Christmas, this week is Happy New Year to everybody.
Absolutely. Happy New Year, Quinny.
The Munster Rugby Podcast, Red 78 with Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Nobody knows Munster rugby better.